In today's episode, I chat with Lauren, who is a mum of two beautiful girls. And in this episode, she tells us her two very different birth stories. So her first birth, which was she had an uncomplicated pregnancy, and then she went on to have a very long labor and pushing phase. And then she tells us how her second birth, she felt a lot more informed. She did hypnobirthing and went on to have a very short labor and pushing phase. During her second pregnancy, Lauren developed gestational diabetes, and she takes us through what this looked like for her in terms of needing insulin during her pregnancy. In this episode, we talk about postpartum hemorrhage, which occurred after Lauren's second delivery, and she was subsequently diagnosed with placenta acreta. She lost a very high amount of blood. And Lauren is really honest about how this might affect her desire to have a third baby. Another thing that we chat about during this episode is postpartum anxiety that Lauren experienced when transitioning from one to having two children. And she's really honest about what this looked like for her and how she managed to identify it and seek help. And this is a really honest and beautiful conversation that we had. You are listening to Cuppa with a Doula. I'm Alicia, exercise physiologist and doula, and every week I chat with a mum or mum-to-be about all things pregnancy, birth and parenting. The stories you will hear in this podcast are real and sometimes raw, but they are all told without any taboo. So grab yourself a cuppa, relax, put your earphones in and enjoy this episode. Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited.
So today we're going to be talking about your two pregnancies. One was, smooth sailing, we can say, and the other one was a little bit more eventful with a few turns and all of that. So it should be quite good.
Turns along the way.
Yeah. So I guess let's start by introducing yourself. So tell the listeners your name, where you're living, and who is in your family.
Yeah, so I'm Lauren. I'm from the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. My husband's name is Michael, and this little one here is Addison. She is my 6-month-old, and I also have a 2.5-year-old daughter named Nora.
And for anyone who's listening and doesn't get the video, Addison is so cute. Let's just say that. Amazing. So let's start with your first daughter, Nora. So was she a planned conception?
No, she was our surprise baby.
Oh, amazing.
So, yeah, that was, we planned to start trying in the new year, but things happened slightly earlier than we were anticipating, but that's okay. We had actually booked a New Year's trip to Japan with a big group of friends, and that we were meant to leave on the 26th of December. We found out we were pregnant with Nora on like the 10th of December.
Right.
What was meant to be eating street food, boozy New Year's was anything but for me. It was,
of course,
first trimester, nausea and naps.
Oh, right. Oh, wow. How did you find out you were pregnant? Did you get nausea straight away?
I always used to laugh when women used to say, I just knew I was pregnant. I always used to go, how did you just know you were pregnant? That doesn't make sense. And then one day, my mum and we were out at the shop, and I felt this wave come over me, and I got like a hot flush, and I felt like I was going to be sick, and it was like nothing I'd ever felt before. And I've looked at my mum and I've gone, oh God. And she's like, what? I'm like, nothing. It's fine. It's all good. And I went home that afternoon and did a pregnancy test. And like I said, I just knew it was just a feeling I'd never felt before in my entire life.
Wow.
And yeah, lo and behold, it was positive. I was about 5 weeks along.
Right.
So yeah. And then Michael had asked, he said, I've folded the washing, it's on the bed. Could you please put it away when you get home? And I've said, yeah, I will. Obviously, I did not do that because I was sitting on the bed waiting for him to come home so I could tell him, and I was in pure shock.
Mm-hmm.
And he walks in the door and I'm sitting on the bed and I've gone, so we did something. And he goes, I can tell you what we didn't do. We didn't put the washing away. Well, I look back, is actually really funny. At the time, it was not taken as funny. I was like, sit down. I need to talk to you. This is serious. Oh, so he thought he was quite funny with that one. Yeah, but once he...
I love the announcement. Yeah. It always makes for such a great story. Those little, details like, oh, the washing was on the bed and he comes in and he's like, oh, we didn't put the washing away. That makes for such a great story.
We didn't put the washing away. So, yeah, that was quite funny. But
too funny.
Yeah, it was, yeah. I mean, wouldn't have it any other way. It was really... In the end, it was good timing because it was end of 2019, so it was just before COVID hit. So we, like, as most would see that as bad timing, we saw it as really good timing because we were able to. We weren't going out, we weren't spending our money on, doing activities and going shopping or going to dinners and things like that. We were staying in, so we were able to really save and pay off a lot of our debts and save so that I could have a really good maternity leave as well. And we not have to worry about finances. So that really worked in our favour first time round.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So because you were thinking about trying, but you hadn't actually started to try, did you know what model of care you wanted for your pregnancy, or were you a bit taken by the whole surprise, obviously?
I wasn't sure what model of care I wanted. I had found a really good doctor here on the Sunshine Coast that I really liked. I'd, seen a few, nothing great, and I just happened to find my doctor when I'd actually hurt my ankle, and I really liked her. And so she was the one that I went to get all my blood works done, and I decided to stick with her and do a shared GP care, just because, she is actually... was part of the hospital system and the referral doctor for the GP program as well. And I'd already found it anyway. And as I'm sure most people know, trying to find a doctor that listens to you and makes you feel heard and cares and has availability as well is really hard these days. That's a big one. So I got really lucky in finding a really good doctor, and we still use it now. So, yeah, cool. I did shared GP care with both my pregnancies because of the level of care that I get from her.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Did you do any birthing education for your first pregnancy?
I did the hospital classes, and which at the time, my first pregnancy, I didn't really know what to expect. I did them and I thought, well, these are the birth classes that everybody does. Everybody just does the hospital ones. And unbeknownst to me, the hospital ones are coming from such a clinical sort of what happens in stages point of view and what they have to do and things like that. I never really realised until after the fact that there's so much that's left out of those systems on what you're going through and what you're feeling and how to go through all of that. So I think with my first pregnancy, when it came to my birth, I was sort of just winging it.
Right. Yeah. So during your, I guess, labour, did you realise that there was a few things that you didn't know or you didn't understand, or you felt like you were not, I guess, equipped as much as you could have been?
All those boxes, ticking all those boxes. I went into my labour going, what, like, I'll just, everyone talked about a birth plan. I said, oh, get the baby out. Like, that's my plan, get the baby out. I was so uneducated and uninformed, and I knew what an epidural was. I knew it was, it'd take the pain away of contractions, but I really didn't know a lot. And it showed because I guess perceived authority, where a midwife or a doctor would tell me something and I'd go, oh, okay, well, you know what you're talking about better than I do because you're the professional. And I look back now and I realize that things were being decided for me rather than with me. And I think that's what led to such a different birthing experience and a different path with my second child, because I wanted to be educated. I wanted to be informed. I wanted to be making decisions with my care providers instead of them making them for me, which just led to a totally different birth experience. Don't get me wrong, there was nothing bad about my first birth experience. It was a long labour. It was 25 hours. It was, I think I got an epidural after about 6 or 7 hours. So I was stuck laying down in the bed, not moving. I was induced because I'd gone over, and I was, for lack of better words, sick of being pregnant. I was like, get this baby out of me. I am 10 days overdue. Baby wasn't ready. So no wonder I had such a long labour. And then I was stuck on my back the majority of it. So no wonder things stalled. And I look back now and they're all decisions that, had I been informed, I may have made differently. But second time round, I knew that I wanted things to be different. So I just happened to be at a baby expo. I was only about 11 or 12 weeks pregnant with Addison. And I met this wonderful woman from Belly Births and Buds named Catherine. I just happened to be chatting to her. Nora was in my arms. Michael had walked off to get food, and Nora was all over the place. And she said, oh, do you want me to hold her for a minute? And I said, that'd be lovely, thank you, just so I can get my phone out of the baby bag on my back and find my husband and ring him. I don't know where he's gone. And we just ended up chatting, and she ran a hypnobirthing course. She's a hypnobirthing practitioner. And just after talking to her for 20 minutes, I walked away and I said, I want to do a course with her. I just connected really well with her. She was beautifully natured. I felt really comfortable with her. And I said, that's what I want to do. And it was
It's so funny. It's so funny how things played out, right? Like you were just at the right place, obviously the baby expo, but you're like at her, like next to her stand, really.
It was, like I said, it was meant to be. It was just, the universe knew that I needed a different approach and I needed a different birth, and this is how I was going to get it. So, it was funny when I first said that to Michael, my husband, that, I wanted to do hypnobirthing. He, like a lot of people, thought, oh, hypnobirthing, what is she going to hypnotize you so you don't feel anything? And, made jokes. And then by the end of the course, he was just in awe of it. It's so much more informed than the hospital system birth classes, because it takes you through I knew I had a contraction, but I didn't know what a contraction actually was. I didn't know what my body was doing and how it was happening. Whereas in this course, I got to learn those things. So I was so, I guess, in tune with my body because I knew what was happening and I knew how things were moving and turning and what was going to happen next. It just made me feel in tune with my body and really connected to my body and my baby. And it just made for a whole different experience. And it just, it changed my perspective on my pregnancy and my birth. There was one thing I didn't want, and it was to be induced, because I'd been induced previously for just going over my due date, and I didn't want that to happen. I really wanted to labour at home and experience that and do things naturally.
Yeah.
Then all these things were thrown at me through my pregnancy, which I was totally okay with. I had gestational diabetes. I was okay with that. I took it on the chin. Addison went breech at 35 weeks, and I was ready to birth her. I was ready to do that. It was fine. She eventually flipped back, which was lovely of her. But in the end, because I was having regular scans, they noticed that she was dropping in percentiles way too much. She'd dropped from about the 55th percentile to the 12th.
Yeah. So with with your gestational diabetes, when were you diagnosed with it? Was it at the glucose tolerance test that you do at 26 weeks?
Yeah. So that was when I was diagnosed with it. It was my fasting levels. So that first sort of morning moment where I couldn't get my numbers. Basically, I couldn't get my numbers under control with that, which wasn't to do with what I was eating. It was to do with the hormones from my placenta. So there's nothing you can't change what you're eating when it's your hormones that are doing that. So I ended up on metformin tablets and insulin injections at night to help with it.
Right. So did they put you straight away on both metformin and insulin together?
After about probably 2 weeks, because we did that the first 2 weeks of, seeing what my numbers were, trying to see if I could get them down with changing like a supper meal and what I was having for dinner, but with no luck.
Yeah.
We went on that pretty quick there. Yeah. And they put me on both together.
Right.
Yeah, which from what they said, from what the diabetes team said at the hospital, and I'm paraphrasing here, the metformin, which was designed to stop insulin, my body's insulin going through to the placenta and through to bulb, was working a little too well and was causing reduced growth.
Right.
In Addison. So we needed to get her out quick, smart.
Yeah.
So I was induced, again, like I said, the one thing I didn't want was to be induced. And in the end, I had to be induced, not because of, like last time where I'd just gone over, but it was medically necessary.
Yeah.
And I had my cry, I had my moment, and then I became at peace with it. And again, I think had I not done the hypnobirthing course, that would have been a totally different perspective and a totally different outlook for me, because it was just something that I had a lot of anxiety around it and a lot of worry around it, but I knew that I was prepared no matter what.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of hypnobirthing is it really helps you to obviously stay calm and accept any way that your birth can go, even if it's not your ideal plan or the one you really want. It really teaches you coping mechanism in case things change and how to adapt to that. And I think that's really beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That was basically where I was at. I'd accepted that things were changing outside of my plan, and I had to be okay with that, and I had to work with it. But like I said earlier, the decision to induce me was being made with me rather than for me. I was on board with it. Where there was a conversation around it. We talked about it extensively because typically with gestational diabetes, they like to induce anyway for the risk of big babies. And I actually declined induction several times because just for the risk of being a risk wasn't enough for me to be induced. And then when it became medically necessary, that was when I was on board, and it was a different story.
Yeah, that's right. How did Michael feel when you were told that it would need to be an induction and she would need to be out fairly quickly and probably earlier than you both anticipated, I guess?
I think, because you think, for both of us, I think it was like you feel like you've done this before. You've been through pregnancy, you've been through birth, you think you know what to expect, you think you know what's coming. And then when a medical curveball like that is thrown at you, it's really worrying. So I think for him, there was a lot of worry because he had no control. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't know if the baby was going to be okay. I was put on essentially bed rest and keeping an eye on Bub's movements for a few days there before they could get me in for an induction. And I think that made him really worried that there was a risk there. It's not a normal pregnancy anymore. There's a risk and you're so close to the end. But on the one side, it made it easier to organise care for Nora.
It would do. There's a lot less unpredictability there for sure.
Yeah, there was obviously that level of unpredictability of what was going to happen and was everything going to be okay. But yeah, in the end, obviously everything worked out and it didn't go quite to plan, but it went there.
Yeah, so did you get induced with the gel?
No, so I was checked on the Saturday and I was already 3 centimetres dilated. Right. So they were originally going to take me in on the Tuesday night and put the balloon catheter in and then take that out the Wednesday morning and start the drip. But I was checked on the Saturday and I was already 3 centimetres dilated, so I didn't need to have the balloon. We just went straight in on the Wednesday morning for the drip.
Okay, yeah.
Which is what I'd had the first time around as well.
Yeah. So did the contractions feel, I guess, similar to your first labour?
I remember them being a lot more intense with my first labour, and I put that down to I didn't know how to breathe. I didn't know how to work with my body and move with the contractions and feel them and I guess surrender to them. So I think the first time around they were so intense from the get-go because I was holding my breath. I'd have a contraction and I'd hold my breath and squint my eyes and like scrunch my toes up. Whereas the second time round, I knew how to breathe through them and how to, ride the wave of them. So they were so much more manageable.
So did you have a birth plan this time or a bit more of an idea of what to do differently this time around?
Absolutely. I did not go in winging it this time.
Amazing. You came prepared. That's it.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that was something that I learned in the course of the importance of a birth plan. It doesn't need to be exact. It's not always going to go to plan, but it gives the people in the room the ability to know what I want when I can't speak for myself. And as well, first time round, Michael sat in the corner and had a 4-hour nap. Second time round, he was a lot more involved and he was it on my behalf. He knew what I wanted and what we both wanted, and he was able to voice that while I was going through the motions of it all and riding the wave and in my own little bubble. And I had my headphones in, listening to my hypnobirthing tracks, and he was able to answer questions that didn't need to be directed to me, which made things so much easier for me because we had that plan there and we were both on board and knew what we wanted.
That's amazing. See, when your partner is on board and he just knows what you want and what obviously you both want, that just makes your life easier because you can just focus on yourself. You can be in your bubble and then you know that someone is advocating for you. That's amazing.
Absolutely. And it made me more at ease as well, knowing that, I had him advocating for me. So there could have been, for all I know, there could have been 10 questions asked. There could have been 2 questions asked, but I knew that he knew how to answer them.
Yeah. Did you get the epidural for this labour?
No, I didn't have any pain relief for this labour. I had a little bit of gas towards the end to help regulate my breathing because my breathing was getting a little bit irregular. So I had a little bit there just to help me through a couple of contractions just to sort of regulate again. But other than that one little bit, I was drug-free, which is something, again, I was very proud of because I didn't want that epidural again, purely because I didn't want to stall. I didn't want to be on my back, stuck in the same position, not letting gravity do its thing, not moving around, which inevitably was what helped so much with such a quick birth. You know, I went from a 25-hour labour and an hour and 40 minutes of that pushing to 4 hours and 50 minutes of labour and only 7 minutes of pushing.
Oh, that's a dream.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That is so good, right?
Yeah. So, and I was still in my bubble. I remember being in the shower and I had the water on my back. I had a student midwife and she was hunched under me with one like shower head on my tummy on my front, and Michael was doing my back, and the midwife had said to me, now if you start to feel any pressure in your bottom, like you need to go to the toilet, let me know. And I've stood up a little bit to sort of like turn my neck and say to her, no, I'm good. And as I moved, that's all it took. I felt her drop and I felt her engage, and that was it. She was coming.
Wow.
And but as part of the hypnobirthing course, they really teach you to like bear down and breathe through your contractions, and you don't need to just really push your baby out. You can, you know, women give birth to babies in comas because your body naturally knows what to do. So I've still got my headphones in. I'm still bearing down and breathing through it, and I can feel her moving up and down and up and down, and I'm really in tune with all of it until a midwife practically shakes me and says, your baby's heart rate has been at 60 for 3 minutes now. We need to get this baby out. And then that's when I've gone, oh, okay, there's an issue, because I was just so in my bubble of giving birth and everything like going exactly how I wanted it to go, that I wasn't hearing what was going on around me. I wasn't hearing them say, you know, you need to get this baby out, until, someone sort of, I guess, pulled me out of my little hypno bubble. So it really was doing its job.
Wow, right. And so you were able to push her out quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was like 3 pushes. And that last one, the 2 pushes when I was in the shower, and then we moved to the bed, and it was 4 pushes because I did 1. And then I remember her saying, I'm just giving you a local because if she's not out on the next push, you'll need to have a episiotomy. And I wasn't having that again. So I remember thinking, nope, she's coming out in this push then. And she came out in 1 whole push.
Wow, amazing. That is so good.
So it was like, in my mind, everything was perfect. I had the unmedicated, you know, quick birth that I wanted. I didn't associate pain. I don't remember the contractions being painful. You know, birthing her wasn't painful. I've got my beautiful baby on my chest, and all of a sudden more people are just walking into the room and they're starting to rush, and I'm just in la la land with my baby on my chest, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Then all of a sudden I could feel that my feet were wet. I remember thinking, why are my feet wet? What's going on? And I've said to my student midwife, what is that feeling? And then I see them and there's blood everywhere, and I was hemorrhaging. My placenta was not coming out. So after about 15 minutes, I was taken off to surgery. So I really only had such a short time. I was able to give Addison her first feed, which was really nice, but it was obviously a very quick encounter because I was losing blood, and I was losing blood fast.
Oh, wow. Wow. So at that point,
Yeah. So
once Addison was born, were you given the injection to help with the placenta coming out? Or did they say, oh,
yeah, yeah. No, so I'd had that because my placenta had been quite hard to get out with my first birth with Nora.
mhm,
So that was part of our plan, that instead of waiting for my body to naturally pass it, we were going to manually remove it this time anyway to help with
mhm.
that blood loss. I'd lost about 1.6 litres with
Oh,
Nora
wow.
of blood. So that was already part of our management plan to make
Mhm.
sure that that was all taken care of. Um, but this time things were obviously just a lot more.
Wow. So Addison is 15 minutes old and you're rushed to surgery, and obviously Michael is left
Yeah.
with her, and he's obviously in a bubble, but then his wife is rushed to surgery and losing a lot of blood. That would have been extremely scary for him, I'm sure.
Yeah, look, I think for him it was a matter of I remember saying to him, "Do not let her out of your sight. Like,
Mm.
don't let her out of your sight." And I think for him it was very much a this is what's best, to save Lauren and to make sure Adam's okay. This is what needs to happen. So I think thankfully, he tries to stay really positive with things like that. So that was, I think, really helpful. That
Yeah.
Are you okay? Are you good?
We've got a bit of hair grabbing on
um,
here.
yeah, someone's not getting the attention they
No.
want. Um, but at the same time, yeah, really like scary for him as well. Of what's going on, how long will I be? What's the outcome? Things like that.
Right. So you take him to surgery. Do you get an epidural or a spinal tap at this point?
I'm not 100% sure. It all happened really fast.
Yeah, of
So
course.
I I I don't think I did. I don't know actually. I'm not 100% sure. But I just remember I had my eyes shut the whole way through to surgery because I was still just doing my hypno breathing. I was
Hmm.
just focusing on that to stay calm. And it's still at this point, I'm not freaking out. Like,
Hmm.
I'm still just on a high. I'm being wheeled to surgery and I'm still on this high from this amazing birth that I've just had. And then the last thing I remember is them putting an oxygen mask over my mouth and then
Hmm.
waking up in recovery. So it
Wow.
really, as traumatic as it sounds, for me it really wasn't, because I was in on such a high of this birth bubble.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah, I didn't like as much as having surgery and everything like that is a negative. For me it was just the next part.
Mm. Yeah, wow. And see, that's where it's really well known that hypnobirthing is obviously really good in labor and birth, but it's a great skill for any other times in life when, for example, something is really stressful or you're feeling maybe like you could get overwhelmed by the situation, or something difficult is happening. It's just breathing, and breathing is essential to keep ourselves calm and keep the nervous system from going into this fight or flight, adrenaline rushing, and just staying as calm as humanly possible. That's great that you could, continue to use those skills and you just stayed as calm as you could.
Absolutely, yeah. And I I honestly don't think I could have done that had I not done hypnobirthing. I would have just been absolutely freaking out and it would not
Yeah.
have been a fun time for anyone.
Wow.
But yeah, so in the end, it turns out that I had undiagnosed placenta acreta.
Wow. So the
So
placenta that's deeply attached to the wall of the uterus, is that right?
yeah, correct. Yep. So it in the end, I lost over 3.5 litres of blood from it. but they were able to, I didn't have to have a hysterectomy or anything. They were able to keep everything intact and remove the placenta fully, which was, again, like, I try and see the positives in all these crazy scenarios. There are women that have this and they have to, at 29 years old, have a partial or a full hysterectomy because of this. So thankfully, that wasn't the case this time for me. It was just my placenta that was removed. And I still had to be in bed for about 2 or 3 days and had 2 blood transfusions and an iron transfusion. But small price to pay for keeping my organs and you know, being alive.
Yeah, of course. Wow. So how did you feel in the recovery room after you've obviously gone under general anesthetic and you wake up? Are you feeling a bit groggy? Did you remember what happened before?
Yeah, I definitely remembered, but I think my first thought wasn't me. It was, where's my baby? I want to get to my baby. I've barely seen my baby. I barely held her. Like, I haven't even given her a name yet. And like, I wanted to get back to my baby as quick as possible. And there's obviously a process you have to follow and you have to be there for a certain amount of time. And I didn't even know how much time had passed. So
of course.
I was also then the worry for Michael sat in, you know, is he worried about me? Does he know that I'm out and that I'm okay? And do my family know what's going on? Like, it was almost like there was all this worry for everyone else except me, because it hadn't sunk in what had happened to me. I'd just given birth and also had, you know, for me, a major surgery. I've never had surgery before in my life. So to have that was huge.
Wow.
And but at the time, all I'm worried about is everyone else. And then probably the next day, the doctors came in and you sort of explained things. And then they explained as well what would happen if I wanted to have a third pregnancy, which they said, you know, you'd have MRIs throughout your pregnancy. You would be classed as high risk. You would have a C-section at 35 weeks. So therefore you would have a prem baby in the NICU, and you would also, have to have either a partial or full hysterectomy based on the extent of the placenta acreta, because we know that it gets worse with each pregnancy. So that, again, to hear the word hysterectomy at 29 years old and 24 hours, less than 24 hours after I've had a baby, and I'm still trying to process everything. I've got all these hormones running through me. I still haven't been able to get out of bed. I've had to sleep 2 sleepless nights. You know, it was a lot. It was a lot to process. Yeah, and of course. I think even now, 6 months later, it's still something that I haven't fully processed, because that fourth trimester, you're in survival mode. You trying to get through the sleepless nights and the long days, and you're worrying about your children and your house and all these other things. You don't really have time to worry about yourself, let alone process all of that. So, you know, it's definitely a priority, and it's on the list of things that I need to do. I need to do my birth debrief and really process all of that. But it takes time.
Yeah, because, I mean, unless you've had conversations with Michael about how many children you want to have, and even then you might have 2 children, and even though you had previously said, oh, maybe I want like 4, maybe once you have 2, you both feel like your family's complete, right? But unless you've had those conversations, how do you know whether you want a third child or and now what is placed on your shoulders is basically this third pregnancy comes at a price, which the price is that you'll probably have a hysterectomy.
Yeah, and again, like, the decision is almost, do we have 2 children and that's our family complete? or do I take the risk of having a third baby and a high risk pregnancy? So there's a risk to me and the baby. And like you said, whether it's a full hysterectomy or a partial hysterectomy, they wouldn't know until they were in there. So that in itself is a huge decision to make that I don't get to make until after.
Yeah, of
because
course.
a partial hysterectomy means I still get to keep my ovaries, but a full hysterectomy means that I'm on hormone medication in menopause in my 30s.
Wow.
So it's a lot to take. It was a lot to take in less than 24 hours after giving birth, as you can imagine. So, yeah.
Wow, you're doing something right. That was almost like a switch. Like she just stopped. Wow, amazing.
Carrier. If there's one thing that every mum should have, every new mum, every second-time mum, every third-time mum, is a good carrier, because they will save your life when you need two hands, and baby needs to feel close to you. And that's my one thing that I recommend to everyone, is a good carrier.
Amazing. I'll be sure to highlight that in the show notes for sure. I was literally going to talk about postpartum recovery and how you juggled having Nora, who was, I think, was she 2 at the time of Addison's birth?
She was just under 2, so she was 22 months when Addison was born. Wow. So for a little bit there, I had 2 under 2 technically.
Wow, nice. How was that?
Michael is very hands-on. He's a very hands-on dad. He's a very hands-on partner. So I'm very thankful for that, because I don't know how I could have done it without him. There was a lot of nights where I would just he would cook, he would come home from work, he would cook dinner, he would bath Nora, he would put Nora to bed, because I was just stuck under a newborn, feeding and burping and still recovering myself and all the things. So it was hard, and it was hard mentally for me to feel like I wasn't there for Nora as well. Because she was still my baby. She was my first baby, and she still needed me, and Addison needed me more, which was really hard mentally for me. But slowly over time, it did take time, and that's all it took. There was nothing else there was no magical switch that just made it better. It was just time of how to learn to juggle and picking a situation of who needs more in this moment, and how can I incorporate Nora with Addison. And it's definitely, as Nora just gets that little bit older, it gets that little bit easier, because she can comprehend that little bit more, each day, each week sort of thing. And she's so obsessed with Addison. She loves her so much. So I can remember 5 months ago when Addison was still a newborn, and I'd say to Nora, can you go get me a nappy, or can you go get me wipes? And she'd get halfway down the hallway and she'd forget what she was doing, because she was a distracted 2-year-old. Just in the last few months, I've seen such a change, because I can ask her to get something for me and help me with things, and she's so interested and so keen that she is able to hold that attention. So
that's amazing.
Like I said, time was the only thing that helped, but it definitely gets easier. For me as well, I had a lot of postnatal anxiety, which I feel like everybody I know talked about postnatal depression. That's such a big topic, but I feel like nobody I knew talked about postnatal anxiety, and that it was, in a sense, different. You don't need to, I wasn't depressed, I wasn't sad, I was just anxious all the time about everything. I still struggle with the idea of, having my 2 children alone with me for putting them down to sleep, because I get so much anxiety around juggling. Well, Addison needs to be put down to sleep in the cot, but what do I do with Nora? I can't leave her in the lounge room by myself. I got anxious about the idea of taking them to the shops or taking them both in the car or getting up in the mornings and getting out the door with two kids. So it was, that side of things was so new to me because I knew what to look for with postnatal depression, but not the anxiety side of things. You know, I talked about with friends and family and things like postnatal depression, but I'd never talked about postnatal anxiety. And so I didn't know what it looked like. And I'd never really experienced anxiety either. So when I was so like overwhelmed that I would just either go into a state of hyperness or a state of hypo, like I would just shut down at the foot of having to get up and get the two kids out the door, even just to go to my mum's house, you know, where it's your mum's house, you can rock up in your pajamas with your hair not done. And the thought of it was just overwhelming, or taking the kids in the car or putting them to sleep and all the things. It was just the idea of being by myself and not being able to do it with two kids was all consuming. And that was something that I wasn't ready for because I'd never really thought about it. Like I said, I'd thought about, you know, the signs and what to look for with postnatal depression and what to do and things like that. But I'd never sort of taken into account the anxiety side of things, which really hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't prepared. I'd never really given it too much thought on what it was and how it could affect me. But yeah, it really just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was just something that I'd never experienced before. So I wasn't ready for it. And it's still something that I'm managing now. It's baby steps, but it's getting easier.
Did you get postpartum anxiety pretty much from, I guess, you coming back home, or was it maybe triggered by Michael going back to work and therefore you having the two babies at home, or was it something else that triggered it?
I think it was when I came home, the anticipation of it when Michael went back to work, because he had about 3 weeks off. I think it was the anticipation of it. It hit straight away. Addison was in hospital at 8 days old with RSV. So we spent a week back in there. Yeah, she's had a bit of a rough run. So again, like all things that contributed to not processing my birth was that I had a baby in hospital at a week old with a life-threatening respiratory infection. So many things contributing to not processing my birth straight away and the severity of it all. But yeah, I think the anticipation of feeling like I couldn't do it, I couldn't do two kids on my own if I didn't have help there, I think that hit straight away. And then once Michael went back to work, it just intensified. And as well, like, it was almost like Addison was my responsibility. Michael looked after Nora because I felt like I couldn't give both of my children what they needed because I wasn't enough, which isn't fair on me. Like, that's not fair for me to feel like that and to be in my own head, but that's not fair on Nora as well because I'm her mum and I am enough and I'm everything she needs and she still needs me. But I was in my own head feeling like I couldn't do it.
Did you recognize that negative self-talk straight away, or did it take you a few weeks?
Oh, it definitely took me, a few weeks. Yeah, like I said, a few months probably. And because at first I was like, oh, I'm just sleep deprived. It's just, because I've got a newborn, we're back in the thick of it. And then we sort of exited that newborn stage and things were calming down with Addison, but things were heightening with me and I wasn't calming down and things weren't getting easier in my own head. And I just remember walking into, must have been like Addison's 4-month needles, maybe a little bit earlier than that. But I remember walking into the doctor's one day and my doctor going, so how are things? And just bawling my eyes out. I didn't even respond. I just bawled my eyes out. And because it was just this overwhelming pressure that just built up. Yeah, so obviously I spoke with my GP about everything, and we made a really good plan, and I started going to therapy to, deal with these emotions that I was having in my own head, and this anxiety where I was in my own head. I felt like I wasn't a good enough mum and a good enough wife and I even felt like I wasn't a good enough sister and a daughter because I wasn't juggling things like I needed to, and I was failing at everything, and this anxiety was just eating at that fear. And obviously that wasn't the case, but it's how I felt. And then I ended up making the decision with my GP and my therapist, and I ended up on medication, which is really helping me to be able to, again, control the lows and the highs and manage my own thoughts, because I am good enough. Every mother's a good enough mother. They're exactly what their children need. And I was, again, like I said in the beginning, I was just so thrown about how anxiety makes you feel. And I'd experienced depression when I was a teenager, so I knew what that looked like and I knew what that felt like for me, but I'd never experienced anxiety. So that feeling was totally new to me, and it was just all consuming and really overwhelming because it was a new feeling that I'd never felt before. And I thrown in with, the fourth trimester of nourishing a newborn and a new mother, and it was a lot, but
yeah, of course.
Definitely, so it's definitely something that, I'm still working on, but things are getting a lot better after I spoke to someone and I sought help, and I accepted that I do need help and that this isn't normal. Everyone talks about, oh, that's just the baby blues, and, all mums, you won't be the first and you won't be the last to feel like that. Well, it's not normal. You don't have to just suffer through it and deal with it and move on. You can seek help, and it can get better.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you're saying that, because mental health is something I'm really passionate about. And as you said, it's, a new mom or a mom of 2, 3 should not suffer through that fourth trimester, or through, even if the baby is, 12 months old, it shouldn't be a painful experience, or an experience where you're not feeling good enough and you have those, potentially intrusive thoughts, or you place unrealistic expectations on yourself. And if that's the case, then it is very good to seek help. Seek help from a therapist.
Absolutely.
Might start with seeing the GP and getting maybe a mental health care plan in place. And then, as you said, medication for you is really helping you, and that's fantastic that you're talking about that and you're opening up about it. So thank you.
Yeah, and I've, like I said, I think about medication being okay. The therapist said to me, if you have a headache, you take medication. If you hurt your ankle, you take medication. So why is it okay to take medication for those things, but not for mental health? Because it's going to help you. And once I sort of saw it like that, it just made it so much easier. If medication is the route that people and women need to take, then it's not the enemy. You've not failed. It's not a bad thing. It's going to help.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And help can take many different forms. And in your case, you're combining therapy and medication. And if that's what works for you, it's not a one size fits all. You need to find what works. And I'm sure with medication, you might have had to trial maybe 1, 2, change the dose, kind of see how it makes you feel. It's not an instant relief, but you are working through things, and that's really good.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that. It's not an instant relief, and the movies make it look like it is. You see in the movies they pop a Xanax and they calm down and they feel better. But it's definitely, like you said, you've got to work with your GP and your care providers to find the right medication, the right dosage, what works for you, like what side effects, because every medication ever has side effects, and what's going to be okay with you, and all those types of things. But yeah, there's definitely such a stigma around it all still. Like there's definitely, we're definitely breaking down walls around it all, but there is still a huge stigma around mental health and medication and seeking therapy and talking to someone. And I guess, and the hard, and as well, really hard thing is just finding a good GP provider. Like, because that was my starting point. That's a lot of women's starting point as well, as speaking to their GP. So having that level of care there that you're able to openly talk to, that's a huge thing as well. So if you can find if women can find a good GP, hold on to them for dear life. Never let them go, because they are really hard to find and they really are in your corner to help you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that message you've just sent about mental health, because it is amazing to hear it from another mom who is saying seek help, and it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to talk to a therapist or go on medication or do a combination of both if it helps you to actually get better and feel better. That's amazing.
And absolutely. And like I was saying, my biggest thing was women in my life, which is like older women in my life from a different generation, saying, you're not the first and you won't be the last to feel that way, or every mum feels that way. If every mum feels that way, then every mum needs to speak to someone, because it's not healthy and it's not okay to have those thoughts. And it's definitely something that you can work on to be better, like to feel better. Because when you feel like this, you've got that anxiety or that depression, it doesn't feel nice. No part of it feels good. So, it's just such a stigma around that, and tricking women into believing that, okay, well, every mum feels like this and this is normal. This is just being a mum. Being worried is just being a mum. It's definitely not.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And sometimes it can be hard to know what's normal and what's not. Where is the boundary between normal and not? And I think, and at least early on when baby is still quite young, you have those regular appointments with your GP for, needles. And I think it's quite good to even just mention it to your GP, even if you don't think that it is wrong, or sorry, I shouldn't say wrong, even if you do think that this is normal, and just mention it to your GP and see if maybe what you believe is normal may not be the normality, or it may not be the norm for everyone. It may not be how every woman is feeling, because when we're living in it, it's our reality, and we don't know that it may not be everyone's reality, of course.
And there are women that, just because even if you're, out of the fourth trimester, or your baby's 6 months old or 12 months old, like postnatal depression and anxiety doesn't have a time frame on it.
Definitely.
And your baby could be 2 years old, and you felt like this for 2 years, and you just think that it's part of the norm now. Like, this is just how you feel, and this is just life, and it's okay to seek help that late in the game, because seeking help at any point is better than not seeking help at all and feeling down and sad and anxious, and it's okay.
Yeah, that's right. And especially in Australia, we've got those mental health care plans where those sessions are subsidised. So that's really good to help really break down the barrier of cost, financial barrier, so that this service is accessible to anyone, and it can be accessed at any point. Doesn't matter if you're pregnant, you're a mom, you're a mom to a 3-year-old, it does not matter. You can go to your GP, ask for a mental health care plan, and then seek a mental health specialist professional to then talk to and talk about feelings and everything.
Absolutely. And look, a lot of the times there are wait times to see professionals, unfortunately, sometimes.
Right.
Busy times of year and things like that. So there are online and phone call resources as well that women can access for immediate help too. So that's something that I didn't even know was available. I thought I just had to wait the month for my appointment, and there was no one to talk to in the meantime, and I just had to deal with it for another month and feel like this for another month. But there are immediate phone services that you can talk to. I think it's called Panda, I believe.
That's right. I was going to mention it.
Yeah.
Yes, it is called Panda, and you can access it at any stage, whether you're pregnant, you're postpartum. They have I think it's a 24/7 helpline. It's almost like Lifeline. And yes, you can call that number, and those people are trained over the phone, and they will help to talk through whatever you're experiencing, even if you think, oh, it's not that bad, or I'm doing all right, or I don't really need to seek help. If you're thinking about it, just make the call. You're never going to be wasting time.
No, that's it. And what's the worst that happens? You get to have a vent to a complete stranger who listens and understands. And even if you take away no advice that they give you, you might feel a little bit better because you got it all off your chest and had a vent. And it's not a girlfriend or your mum or your sister that could judge you, or you have to see next week after you tell them how you feel, and it's someone that you never have to speak to again. And you can just get it all off your chest and take a deep breath. Because that's what it was. That's what it was for me. I was feeling really down, like I said, that I'd failed as a mum. And when I gave them a ring, I just felt like, I said it, and I feel like a weight has been lifted, because I feel like I've told someone and someone listened, and I wasn't feeling judged. Because that's a huge part of being a mum as well, is especially with social media, feeling so judged that you're not good enough, or that there's someone better than you and someone handling it better or doing it better. So
that's right. And that's the problem with social media. It's just a photo at one instant in life, yet we as mom, I guess, tend to extrapolate and go, oh, that mom is doing so much better. They've got it together. Their house is perfect. It's clean. There's no washing that's overdue. They've just got they've got it all covered. But yet that's just one snapshot in time, and it may not be the reality. And we know that social media is showing you what it wants to show you.
Absolutely. I have a friend who is an influencer who has a very good social media following, and I've been out to coffee with her daughter, and the picture that she posts is her and her daughter having a baby Chino and like looking all cute. But I know the meltdown that toddler was having 10 minutes before that picture was taken. And my friend was going, I don't know why I left the house. Like, she's just in meltdown mode today. Like, so pictures and real life can be very different.
Exactly. That's right. And I think it's important to remember that, because, yes, as you said, as mums, I feel like that's when we're the most vulnerable, and that's when we can let this idea of everyone is doing it better than me get to us, and then it just spirals out into negative self-talk, negative feelings, and that's just, it's a spiral. It just keeps on going. That's just not good. Yeah,
absolutely, definitely. It's been a wild ride.
Yes, of course. And having two, it's almost like you've got your whole routine with your first one, and then Addison's born, and it's I guess like a little cyclone. It's a new routine that needs to happen.
Oh, any routine that we had previously is completely out the window. Completely gone.
Of course.
But, I mean, look, and I wouldn't, at the end of the day, I wouldn't change a thing. Nora ran into me yesterday morning. Addison was in her cot, and I was getting ready, and Addison was starting to crack it a little bit. Nora was obviously talking to her, and Nora runs into me in the bathroom next door, and she goes, Mummy, I made Addison happy. And my heart just melted as she said that, because, Addison stopped crying because Nora was like looking at her through the cot bars and that, and it melts my heart how much they love each other. And I just wouldn't change a thing. I've just got the most two beautiful, amazing girls, and I've got the most kind, like, toddler I've ever met, and I just, I love it. It's crazy, but I love it.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get notified of when a new episode comes out, please subscribe to this show on your podcast listening platform. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcast or share this episode so that other moms can find it. If you would like to tell your own pregnancy, birth, or parenting story, please head to the show notes and you will find a form there to get in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be with you again next week for a new episode.